Hi, we're here in San Diego, and we're going to be joined momentarily by Philip Berry, who will be broadcasting from his home in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. This is going to be a very interesting conversation. We're going to be joined, I believe, by LA-based Ken Lloyd, Dr. Ken Lloyd, has a PhD in organizational psychology and development, and has written several books. It's going to be an interesting conversation. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with Global TV Talk Show. Thank you for being a viewer and being my customer. And please consider coming on the show. There's no registration fee and no further obligation, but I think you're going to like it. And then maybe you'll become a member of the Global Press Club and enjoy free access throughout the year. Okay, we'll be right back.
The question that
We're here in San Diego, and Philip's in Fort Lauderdale, and Dr. Ken Lloyd is in LA. And this is a get-together before we launch into the official program today. So Philip was just asking Ken to describe more about his PhD and his early work. Ken?
Sure. Just real quick thumbnail. I had gone to Berkeley as an undergrad, went to UCLA for a master's and PhD in industrial relations, organizational behavior, and then immediately went into management consulting, worked for a boutique consulting firm out here, focused mainly on behavioral science kinds of topics, organizational development. Did that for a number of years while at the same time teaching part-time over at UCLA Anderson in the MBA program. Did that for a lot of years, just on a part-time basis. Had a newspaper column dealing with people issues at work, and started writing various books on all kinds of people-related topics, books on selling, books on management, books on recognition, obviously on performance appraisals, and just the wide spectrum. Even did one on the workplace and weight gain, how jobs are contributing to employees gaining weight. So anything dealing with people at work, that's always been my interest, been my passion, if you will. And joined one of my clients back in 2003 as a VP of Employee Planning and Development. They were just a wonderful client, and I really enjoyed working with them. And they said, "Hey, you ever think about joining one of your clients?" I said, "Had not, but in this case, yes." And spent a lot of years with them. Built their HR department, which reported, I won't even say to me, more with me. Had a wonderful HR team. Had a true success story with the key person I hired, who started out as an HR coordinator and then became an HR administrator, then became HR manager. Ultimately, got her college degree, got her PHR, and ended up director of HR and diversity for the largest medical apparel manufacturer in the world, which is the company I was working at. And she just did great. And it was just such fun to work with her and have her build the department and continue from there. So did a lot of that kind of HR managing, but really more collaboration than anything else. So
Let me just add this, if I may, Ken. The article that you referred to was the syndicated column with the New York Times syndicate, right?
Correct.
And that was like a Dear Abby kind of thing, or?
Yeah, it was kind of Dear Abby for employees. 10 years syndicated with New York Times Syndicate, and 20 years running. It was fun, and the questions were just across the board. Whatever you can imagine, people were asking. I mean, some were incredibly bizarre, but that kind of made it fun too. One of the most bizarre ones, as long as we're on it for a second, was a person who had said that, in our company, we're required to travel. We have to go to company meetings, and they're trying to save money at the same time. So they want us to share rooms, and sometimes it's co-ed. What? So now it's probably not even legal. I don't give legal advice, but said, no, you don't want to.
These are the early days, Ken.
You bet. But just crazy stuff that would go on out there, along with dealing with bullies and dealing with harassment and dealing with all kinds of opportunities.
The early days of customer care or employee care.
Yeah, oh my goodness, or lack of same. Yikes.
So you spent 18 years with this employer.
Yes.
Yeah, if I remember right. Great. I'm just trying to be a good host here. Keep
You're doing
things going.
great.
Okay, so I really
Hey, that's
appreciate
great.
your insight and sharing information. Um, so, Philip, you on an earlier show, you've been on many shows, thank you, but you talked about Procter and God. And
Yeah, yeah,
now,
right,
is that
right, yeah.
because of the
That's what they used
Cincinnati
to call it,
community?
yeah.
What exactly did that mean in terms as employee relations? Um,
Right. Well, it's interesting because when I first started at Procter, and the reason why they called it Procter and God, because you can be, and I'm originally from the New York City area, Kim, and so I went there to Cincinnati, and I could go to any store. And so say if I didn't have my driver's license or something, or I didn't have my credit card, and then they said, "Oh, well, where do you work?" And I say, "I work for Procter." "Oh, Procter and God, your ID is good enough for us." I mean, it was like instant credit, because it was such trust that was built into the city there, in terms of a company. But the work that I originally did was working on new, like, you have, man, and you appreciate this, Ken, because especially with a lot of the work that you did in Berkeley, which was one of the preemptive organizations in dealing with social thought and social movement, and also organizational behavior. Yeah, and so what I did was to have a way of developing new manufacturing systems and turning them into what we call socio-technical systems, where you were optimizing the performance of the work, but also with job design, and looking at different ways. So when we would go into a, say, plant, I go into Georgia, yeah, and pulp and paper mill, and what we would do is we would design the organization from scratch. So that way, from the standpoint of career development, the jobs that people were doing, the job itself, how it was designed so that people were able to learn different tasks, a whole job as opposed to just a single job. And so I was out of that school of thought for a long period of time. And it was a way of changing traditional manufacturing systems, into newer ones, which would have a new way of optimizing how you work with people and how you produce, and how you are also in line with how you work with the community that you're in, and the community from the standpoint of the environment, and from the standpoint even of the diverse backgrounds of the areas that you would go into, and being a good employer, in those areas. So I had a real love for that. And then I branched off into the international area with Procter and Gamble, doing new plant design in Mexico and Peru and Ecuador and Guatemala, and so that was how I began to get my international chops together before I came back to New York and was working with Colgate-Palmolive, where I was doing that on a global basis, but now I was more skilled in a number of the other areas of human resources in terms of labor relations and plans and benefits and all that kind of stuff. So what I did was to build that into my career development, and moved into that in the international area. But it was really, and so the way I look at work, and it's interesting. Ed, I haven't seen that particular article in a while.
this is global HR when you were a young man.
Yeah, exactly.
And thank you, Colgate Palmolive, for advertising.
Mm,
More when I'm thinking of bringing this thing back. That one. Anyway, I'll
Yeah, no,
more about
definitely.
that later. I thought I'd just inject some humor here.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. But I really like what Ken was talking about in his whole, the way that he was fostering a learning environment and the people that he learned with. I mean, I know I could probably name a few people that I know like Herb Stokes or Warren Bennett and Edgar Schein. Those are people who I know that you studied with and I did too, in terms of understanding them and understanding their school of thought.
We are gathered here today for Philip's presentation and then a discussion. Philip, the show is yours.
Well, let me see. I'm going to present one of the things that Ed wanted me to delve into is how we are able to improve organization,
Yeah,
uh,
strengthen. Yeah.
strengthen, yeah, global partnerships and in order to improve the business. And what I'll do, let's see, I'm going to share just a few thoughts here, which I'll put up on slide. And then what we could do is we can use that, Ken, as a basis of discussion, in fact, after I go through presenting some of these thoughts here. Okay, so let's see.
Oh, by the way, Philip, I love your new website.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, it's really classy.
Yeah. The So I think one of the reasons why we're here is that it's important, especially even more so now, that we look at business environments and how we can continue to be truly global and what are some ways that we need to operate differently if we are going to do that. And so I want to talk about business partnerships in a few very technical, it seems like more technical areas, but it's some areas that people need to think about if you're going to be working in a global environment. And strengthening those type of relationships is important. It's not just going in, and saying, okay, we're the United States and therefore adopt the way we're doing it. There's a way that we can go in and we can have successful partnerships that go across the realm. And so and so I'm going to talk about four different factors, and one of them is the whole area of cultural intelligence. Many people feel that they always want to get the quote unquote smartest person. They're focusing on IQ. But as it can, especially as you realize, it's more than just being smart and having people who are degreed in certain areas, but also it's EQ and everything that goes with emotional intelligence. And I think that through true behavioral excellence comes from the CQ, which is understanding culturally what's different from one place to another. And so, and how we can blend that and understand that so that way we can be richer in terms of the work that we're doing. And so recognizing the cultural dimensions is important. And while we would take Ken and I uh, could speak forever about the differences in how individuals approach things like individualism versus collectivism and power distance and time orientation and number of the other things that make an individual's perspective different from one country to another. But understanding all of that is important. And I found, especially as I was working in the different countries, all of the different regions, that it was the key to my success. It wasn't trying to find smarter people, but finding people who could work across those different areas and also adapting the decision-making approaches was extremely important. So that way people can understand that you're not just looking at a top-down process, but building consensus, and how you build consensus is going to dramatically different from one place to another. And effectively, what's another aspect of this is being having some type of communication strategies that really build on that. For example, understanding the whole issue of language considerations, which is important as you're going from one place to another, and being able to see how you can avoid what I call these type of idioms that we always use in the United States, baseball examples, football examples, which we go into. And in fact, one of the things that I was looking at, matter of fact, which came to us a few months ago, was when one of our leaders in the US presented to another person in the Ukraine and said, well, you don't have all of the cards, in terms of understanding the situation. Well, and the guy said, well, I don't play cards. I don't play, this is not a baseball game. I mean, just that way of, the Americans have of approaching stuff using the analogies and ways that relate to us, as opposed to trying to build in a communication that would take into account and promote language understanding for everybody. And I also found that as you're working in different regions of the world, trying to find a idiom or a channel or platform that is going to be effective in different areas is going to be important. Like WeChat is very good in China. WhatsApp is in Latin America, and there might be other type of channels that people are using. And instead of just coming in with one channel and saying that this is the global channel we should use, being able to modify the channel so that way it really helps people to relate to it. And then being able to, especially when you're working with different countries and understanding uh, time zone appreciations, and being able to get an understanding that, I mean, Ed, you've been doing that recently with when you developed some of your sessions, and not only here, but what you did also in the past was looking at the time zone that people are in and trying to develop a time that people could meet, not just on the standard U.S. Way of approaching it, but approaching it in a way that considers that and respects, the way that other people are looking at their time and looking at their day, and so that's an important piece there. Um, and then and an understanding that helps to build trust. And sometimes you will try to develop trust. Many of us try to develop trust based on face-to-face meetings. But being able to use, especially since the pandemic, being able to establish trust through devices like Zoom and other ways is also a very important piece. And it has to do with how you're communicating with people and how you read verbal and nonverbal cues with people, understanding that, and not just pushing them into one way of responding just because this is the way you respond. But we need to be able to also understand other type of protocols, like gift giving is important, and how you do that, and being able to send something to people ahead of time so that way they could think about it, as opposed to just bringing it there and not doing something that is going to be inconsiderate of the colors that people use. I remember going into China, and I didn't have I didn't wear red, a red shirt, or have something red in my, just so that people would understand that colors, numbers that you use, what's the significance of 8 or 4, which mean different, or in the U.S., like in the building that I'm in, the condo that I'm in, there's no 13th floor. Well, there are things like that in other cultures that are important also that we need to understand. Um, and then the other three pieces that I want to present was how you navigate regulatory challenges. And one of the ways that, especially that one does that is not by just having your overall general counsel from the global organization come in, but being able to have local councils in each of the areas, each of the markets that you go in, because contract considerations are and requirements are going to be very, and how you enforce it, it's going to be very different from one country to another. Um, there are a number of things now when we look at data compliance and protection in Europe. Matter of fact, there's one app that I've been trying to use, and I can't even get through it because of the European requirements around the standards of what information can be shared and what information cannot be shared. And so being able to appreciate that is important. And so the whole issue of cross-border data transfer and processing is something that needs to be fully understood from one area to another. So that way one is communicating and building relationships that make sense. And then the whole issue of tariffs. In fact, I'm working on a project right now, which in the Philippines. And this project in the Philippines is looking at some of the initial tariff restrictions that are or requirements that are being imposed by the United States, but they don't think about the type how this affects people on a local basis. And on a local basis, for example, we there are other tariff agreements that are in place throughout Asia. You have Australia and New Zealand that you need to think about also. I mean, there's all of these, and then even throughout Europe. I lived in Paris, as you might remember, Ken, where just from one country to another, being able to understand what those requirements are and regulatory challenges can make you a very good team member. And I'll tell you how. For example, I remember we were launching a product, a toothpaste. And so what we decided was that, well, from the standpoint of having a true global launch, or Europe, in this case, a true European launch of this product, we decided instead of just having the manufacturing, the packaging, and the marketing and communication of that all in one country, that we would share those different components based on the country that you're in. So, for example, we decided to manufacture this toothpaste in England, but then when we looked at the ingredients that would go into that, we had to make sure that we were subject to the regulations that were in place, for example, in Germany. And then also from the standpoint of marketing, we wanted to look at Greece and Italy so that we can understand the best ways to market. So, and then once we did that, when we had all of those individuals on the team, as opposed to just having one team to uh, impose all of those components on all of the other countries, you have everybody involved. So that way you have what I call a true European launch. And that's the same thing that you think about when you are trying to launch a product on a global basis, so that having a team in place that understands all of the different aspects of a product's launch from beginning, manufacturing, all the way to the time that you communicate it to the ultimate consumer, and understanding the type of controls and pricing, and how you price it and where you launch first, and making sure that you pay attention to standards that are in place. And then the other piece around that I found that's important, especially in terms of being able to have you need to one needs to understand the global digital tools, especially now with AI in place, and being sure that you can have teams that are connected across all of the different areas. I remembered that there was an organization which I know that Ken, you probably have some familiarity with the SAP, and SAP was a really big deal at one point, especially in the US companies, as they were trying to figure out how they were going to store data and how they would transfer data, and being able to have a collaboration that went across the board and understood all of the requirements of different companies and countries that is what helped to expedite and facilitate the launch. And having project management teams looking at, like, for example, maybe Asana or Monday.com or Jira, all of those would provide in throughout Asia visual workflows, so that way you are able to get through uh, and communicate across language barriers. And the same with virtual meetings when we're looking at Zoom, and team meetings and AI, being able to translate all of those import and across, so that way you take into account language considerations. And so sometimes people just look at this whole issue of developing business tools just from the US standpoint, but one needs to be global in terms of how they're looking at it. And even the piece that you have right now, Ed, which is very good, where you're looking at cloud-based systems and that can go across and that can be communicated across to the different teams. So, and then the last component that I wanted to present is how you deal with conflict across cultures. And for example, in if you're dealing with, I remembered having an individual who I moved from, who was very good in Germany, and he was very successful in working with direct confrontation. But then when I moved him to Thailand, because he needed to be more team oriented there, he was not successful until he went through a period of learning. So then that's something that needs to be considered when you're looking at other countries also. Maybe even moving a person from a China or from a Thailand, to another country, into the UK, or moving him into Poland or something. Identifying the cultural patterns and understanding that and how people deal with conflict is important. And then the whole issue number two of selecting a venue and that is going to allow people to save face. Face saving for many Asian cultures is extremely important, and not doing something where not saying or confronting them in person when you could do it in private in a certain way. There are people that don't understand that sometimes when you're in a Zoom meeting and then you confront the person and you'll say something there, but maybe you should have a conversation offline and talk with them first, and also give them time to talk as opposed to listening to you listening to them to understand why they might have gone through a certain action that they took place. And then being able to frame on a discussion so that way you're focusing not just on the problems, but looking at the mutual benefits, what's in it for everybody. And I find that especially when you're trying to learn different cultures, being able to understand what can work for people so that way they feel that it's something in it for them. And it's not just, especially when you're dealing with relationship oriented cultures. And then being able to document very clearly the outcomes on the resolution that you have according to the culture, so that way everybody feels that they have some skin in the game. So to key takeaways that I would put through in all of this as I summarize here, is that investing in global cultural intelligence is important for everybody, no matter who it is. It's not just a matter of people understanding your culture, but you understanding other cultures. Prioritizing the relationships that need to take place. If you go into, I remember one very important meeting where I was working with in Turkey with an organization where I was trying to, this is with Colgate Palmolive, and we were trying to acquire this particular company. And what we needed to do was, so we went there, we said, well, this is something that can pretty well be solved in just 3 days, and we'd go there for 3 days and then we'd go back to the US. Well, we found that we really needed to spend a lot more time with relationship building. People want you to understand who they are and what they're about and how they're doing things and how they conduct their business. They want you to feel that there's something in it for them as opposed to just something for you. and then establishing communication protocols, as I was talking before, that's important, and implementing compliance frameworks that everybody buys into. Though these four pieces in itself, as people are trying to outline a framework for how they make decisions and how they're going to work together, are important things that need to be in place. And I think I always look at it from the standpoint that people need to rebrand who they are, and especially leaders, we need to rebrand them so that way they can work. When you have them in one area of the world and you move them into another area, how can we get them to modify and learn as opposed to staying with the skills that made them maybe successful in the country that they were in before? So those are just some of the thoughts that I wanted to share.
Bravo. Years ago, you taught me that by example, you talked about how you noticed that some personal characteristics of people, business people in, say, Eastern Europe, uh, could be similar to Latin America. And,
Yeah,
and and then you develop that expertise in those people to recognize that kind of advantage and then develop that talent, which made it into an asset for the corporation.
yeah.
And that I was so impressed. I'm remembering it to this day. And here it is again.
Well, what was so key about that, especially Ken, was that in Romania, it's a yeah, communist country. So yeah, I went into Romania, Poland, Czech Republic, and as the VP of HR for that whole division, and when the Berlin Wall came down. And so when we were looking at the marketplace itself, what we wanted in Romania, we wanted to bring people who we thought into that country who would be able to fit, who want fit from a cultural standpoint. So when the first cultural features is understanding that Romanian is a Romance language, and so people from Latin America, they could easily pick that up. Just like if you speak Spanish, you can pick up Italian pretty easy. You're not going to be able to pick up French as easy, but you can pick up Romanian and you can get along with people. But the other thing was we brought people in who could understand the marketplace and how it operates and how consumers make decisions. And so we brought people from Guatemala who would understand that better and who could fit very well into a place like Romania, because the difficulty that one always has when you are bringing a family in from another country is, is the family going to fit, and are they going to be able to adapt in a certain way? And so the more that you can get in place certain things like the marketplace and the goods and services that people see, they're going to be more likely to adapt and culturally to it, and therefore from a business standpoint.
Ken?
And I'm thinking you might have the best product, the best ideas in the entire world of how to market whatever goods or services you're providing. But by golly, if you don't take to heart and really act on the kinds of points that Philip is mentioning, you're going to fail no matter what that product is. To understand communication, to understand relationships, to understand and act on compliance, and certainly cultural intelligence, all those key takeaways that Philip mentioned, critical for success. So it's more than just the product, which is very easy to have hubris, particularly for Americans. Aren't we so great? We know it all. And if you don't really hear what we're saying, we're going to talk louder. Okay. That is just not a formula for success at all. But if you really have great product and then combining what Philip is mentioning as critical factors for success and really growth, it's a whole different world. But just to come in as, when I was growing up, was the ugly American. We know it all, and you have to listen to us, and this is how you do it. You're not going to build trust that way. And these days, you're not going to build anything that way. So Philip, the information you're providing here is just are just the key factors for global success in the business organizational world. That's how important I regard your information.
No, thank you.
Let's talk for a minute. This is not political at all, but President Trump is obviously having success in securing huge contracts for business for America, um, according to the press. Just recently with London, and now just with the European Union, and also this past week, Japan. I mean, it's huge numbers. And how keeping in mind what you just presented here about all these different cultural things that are so critically important, what are we seeing here with our president, who's obviously having some success, uh, getting things accomplished in light of what you've just presented and all those cross-cultural necessities, knowledge necessities?
I think that we need to, before we put a label to say that all of these deals are totally successful, I think we need to let some time go and see how it plays out in the local marketplaces and also in the marketplace here. I think it's too, I think that we have our present political structure has a great way of getting good headlines and timelines, great marketing from that standpoint. That's that is their competency. That you know, in I always and I think that Ken also, especially as students of human and organizational behavior, we look at the competencies that people bring, and certainly there is a key competency in terms of getting the headlines and getting that first situation through. However, I think that we need to see how the economy plays out, how things play out in the economy, not only here but also locally. We need to look at how the ease of, like when you have a Mexico and a Canada, your neighbors, and you put restrictions, and when those have been our neighbors and quote unquote friends for a long period of time, we need to understand what the reputation of America and Americans will be on a long-term basis. I say that I don't think that we can say success yet. We could say success from the standpoint of maybe the initial piece, and that's okay. But I'm holding off a little bit on total whether these are totally successful and what does success mean? Does success mean that okay, we're just able to get this one deal, or are we doing something to strengthen the relationships and the economies and the flow of information? I'll give you another example of something. It is not, it is not for us to tell other countries that you have to build all of your stuff in the United States is not a tenable solution for a lot of those countries because the um, the to be able to take everything that is manufactured in one place and then move it to another, uh, where would you move it? Are you able to get the labor in place? Like Apple is going to have the problems in finding the labor force that understands all of the technology in order for them to, if they were going to move everything from China to here, when we have people already in China who understands all of that stuff. So I think that I don't think that we need to be political about it. I think that what we need to do is to understand from a global standpoint, what is the impact in terms of improving the world? And are we, and then also when we look at other aspects of the relationship, not only economy, but the environment, development of people, the taking care of the health situation of people, enriching the lives of the workforce in all of the different aspects of the workforce from a standpoint of men and women, and the fact that we have in not only in this country, but every country has immigrants, and so how are we structuring economies so that way we're able to facilitate the entrance of immigrants into countries, so that way they can prosper just like others who were previous immigrants that came to those countries. I mean that's another solution there. And then the last thing I would say on it, is that with the uh, what we're doing with Harvard and initially not allowing people from other countries to come over and study. When, matter of fact, the president of the Philippines, was, not the present one, but before, the Marcos's, his mother. I mean, she studied at Harvard, there are a few other countries that are like that. They studied at Harvard. So what we had was a way of people getting a rich knowledge base that they were able to take in other places. So I don't think that we should be closing ourselves off to other people in that way.
Also, if I can just jump in, thank you very much for this take. This is unrehearsed, as you could tell, audience, but it's really smart stuff, and it's really interesting to me. So, Ken, just 1 second, if I can just say that about the Harvard situation, I happen to have firsthand knowledge of relationships that were built as students at Harvard. I wasn't a student at Harvard, but I know people who were. Uh, and they made friends. They were introduced, of course, but all in this casual learning, intelligent place. The sons and nephews and daughters from the royalty in the Middle East to people who happen to be from my background, which is, of course, Jewish, uh, and how that impacts with Israeli and Saudi and UAE relationships to this day, right now.
Mhm.
It all started back there in the dorms
Yeah.
and the playing fields. Ken, I think you could probably also address that from Berkeley and UCLA.
Well, to Philip's point, I think that what we're seeing here in his response to your question is that this is like a book, and we now have just seen the introduction. Let's see how all of the other chapters of this play out. It's fine. We've got treaties signed. The markets are enthusiastic, stock market, and so forth. Now let's see the real results as we go all the way down the road. Some of these changes already internally to the country, to the U.S., for example, cutting research funding is a real question. And
Yeah. Yeah.
we're looking in terms of medical advances, scientific discovery, individuals from other countries who bring great technology when they study here and work here. And as this plays out, uh, let's see what happens, because the signs may have been initially positive. Hey, we're going to save all this money, but actually we really see this is coming at a cost, and things do come at a cost. There's no free ride. So
Yeah.
I totally agree with Philip. I want to see how all of these play out and ultimately resolve, because a lot of times things are shot from the hip. They sound very good, they're very glitzy, they make a lot of headlines, and then you go, oh, but wait. So that's really what I think we need to do on a lot of this. And for the universities, there are a lot of issues and questions, particularly for universities that don't have major endowments behind them, that maybe they can
Mhm.
ride through the storm. For some of them, it's gonna put a lot of programs and positions and studies at great risk.
Yeah.
So there's some
Exactly.
real serious questions coming about right now.
So the part of that is the technical training that you both have mentioned, particularly vis-a-vis China and their total dedication over the years to build a tech knowledgeable workforce, so that the Chinese car, that new car, I forget the name of it, that's being shipped all over Latin America now from China. That's basically made without a lot of human labor. It's mostly tech, robots who
Mm.
put that little car together that they could sell for 10 or $15,000. So that's never going to happen here.
And I think it'd be very difficult. I believe that we ought to continue to have those free advances of technology and information. I mean, I guess especially because of my whole career, I started at IBM as a techie, Ken. That was my first job, and so I have such affection for that. And later on, I worked at Digital Equipment Corporation, which I think you will appreciate digital because they use a lot of socio-technical concepts in building their organization and doing organizational design and organizational development. So I know that you might be familiar with some of the work that was done there throughout the years. My issue, or not my issue, but I am especially, I went to Columbia also. That was one of my graduate degrees is Columbia. So I've been watching with great interest what's been happening there. And and I really feel that there should be a, a an environment that we build which has the ability to let people speak their mind, but not oppress others who have a different mindset. And I always felt that, especially when I came up through Columbia and also when I went to Queens College, that which was probably 50% of that university system was Jewish ed, in New York. And there was a high degree of acceptance and and also thought, around the way the world should operate and having people talk with each other and communicate with each other and raising your concerns, however, but not oppressing other people. And I think that there's a way to have that type of dynamic atmosphere, in place, which we ought to continue. But to be able to hold hostage the scientific research that is taking place and has taken place is a real big mistake. I mean, you might have success short term. See, I could see short term. We have to look at the difference between long and short term success. And I'm a big believer in long term success. What are some of the things that we're doing to continue to build and keep that going?
Ken?
No, once again, spot on, Philip. And yeah, it's easy off the top, for example, to go, let's cut all of these jobs. So if we were to do that in the real business world, before making any kind of just slash and cuts, let's analyze, let's review where are the gaps, where are the overlaps, where are the inconsistencies, where are the problem areas, as opposed to saying, I'm just going to go cut X% of people and just do it. It takes some real study approaches and analysis before jumping in. And the same for these kinds of other programs that are coming in. It's easy just to throw stuff in and you'll generate headlines, but what are we really doing? And then particularly, we got to backtrack. Oh, maybe we shouldn't have gone this far. Maybe we should change this route. And then you just create chaos, which is not a great word that you want to have in your organization. It just
Mm,
spells the next step, which is a disaster. You just
mm,
don't want that. But some analysis, some studying, some homework, interaction with the team, building, looking at the history, looking at what we need in the future, all of that before we start making dramatic changes, whether in universities, business organizations, or government. It's just not done by the seat of the pants.
no, it's not. It's not on a long-term sustainable basis. You're right. It can't happen by the seat of the stand. We have great brains in place in this country, which we need to continue to bring together. The thing about democracy and the way we've been approaching it is that we have been able to bring together great minds and find ways to let minds flow and find ways that go across that don't denigrate one side versus another. That's just not a way to build a society, by saying that this is like a totally bad, this is totally good. I mean, yeah, there's certain things that certainly can be done very differently, no matter what. We can find a difference and we can build on that. Um, I feel that there's a way that we c- I mean, how are we go there's a way to programmatically include people in we've been doing this for years. And I don't know why we can't find solutions to that now, so that way we can remove people who don't belong here. There are a lot, but or who aren't doing well. But then there are others who we could try to bring into the society, and that's how the society has been built up from all the immigrants from the late 1700s to now. That's how this country has been built. And because it brings in the rich influences of immigrants in a lot of ways, in terms of our food and our culture and how we're approaching things.
I just want to, as we come near a close here, well, I can't really show this, but Philip's on the cover of this magazine um, called Global HR. And it's from 2006. And the Colgate, of course, then. And this is a quote. I'm not here to embarrass you. I'm here to enlarge what we're talking about. Corporate innovation and competitive in the emerging new world economy. This is, again, 2006. This is a quote from Mr. Philip Berry, Vice President, Global Workplace Initiatives and Corporate Officer, Colgate-Palmolive Corporation. If you are big, then you need to have business processes which make you small and nimble. This means you have to operate across boundaries as a global team. The business case for innovation competition is global. The tried and true efforts are not enough. That's from you a long time ago.
Yeah, boy, I gotta dig that thing up, boy.
I will. I could put this in the mail to you because I think I have an other copy somewhere.
Jeez.
But
Well, what I what,
fascinating stuff. I could continue reading this, but I don't want to
no, no,
take your
I
time
appreciate.
here.
But I think it's one of the things that I enjoy about this particular discussion, and why I was so glad that Ken you had a chance for Ken to just talk about some of the work that he did, and so I understand his values, and I understand more what he brings and his competencies and capabilities, and just the work where he lived and where he was exhibiting his growth, is in the areas like it was a cell. It was a place where great thought was developed around organizations and people. In that whole area, everything around what he was doing. And I know that I took from a lot of that, the type of thoughts that I have that have helped me, and as I've been working in organizations. So I was really glad that you could bring that information to bear from Ken. Thank you very much, Ken.
Thank you. And, it's funny, you mentioned Edgar Schein. The first industrial psychology book that I read was written by him, and it had it all, and it just said to me, this is what I'm really interested in. And it was so well written, not a wasted word in it, not one of these 1,000-page things. Just
Mhm.
here's what it is, here's how it works, here's how it can benefit individuals, groups, teams, organizations, the economy, the world. It was so well written, and it's how many years old is that by now? But it was a great
Yeah.
book. He's a great author and scholar.
He was, yes, evergreen. And Ed, just to reiterate, because I had mentioned that to Ken when he was talking, and like those are people that we have learned from a lot, that have embodied our thoughts and values, and that we've carried throughout the organizations that we're in. So it's interesting.
Ken, let me ask you as we come to a close here in the next 5 minutes or so, at the top of the hour. People development, trust in the workplace, whether it's remote or in office. The ball is in the people leaders in companies, not government, in my view. Could you elaborate on what I just said? And you have perspective here, and and
Oh,
and and of course, Philip, please jump in.
yeah, just off of the, not coming in every single detail, but certainly the people side of leadership, management, coordination, cooperation, all of that is just critical. Understanding others, not coming in with my way or the highway. This is how it's done. I know everything, but rather demonstrating empathy. And I really like the concept of cultural intelligence, because even within the US, within our organizations, there are various cultures, there are people from different cultural backgrounds, but to be sensitive to that, to be aware of it, and to think that, the old management textbooks would say, well, what does a manager do? Plan, organize, staff, control, and direct. That's it. That's gone. We really have to step back and take a look and make sure that we are understanding people, demonstrating empathy, building trust, showing respect, focusing on employee growth, development, acting more as coaches. All of those factors are so critical in building a successful organization, by building your successful team and building on the players that you have there. And talk about changes in the workforce. Today's younger workers, the millennials, want feedback. They want career growth. They want development. They don't want everything just thrown at them. This is how you do it. Go do this, go do that. For managers really to act more as coaches and not authoritarians or disciplinarians, clearly a more effective and productive way to go and to grow.
And they want hybrid. They don't want to be remote 100%.
Just read that again. It's out there, and you see that every day. You're so right, Ed.
Yeah, I've got a granddaughter, 27, and her work as a hotel assistant manager is front desk, right in front of everybody. You can't do that remote.
My comment to what Ken is saying is really just to underscore and put a highlight on every single word that he said. I'll be looking forward to reading that in the notes area, because that's he has outlined the solution, and all we have to do is to be able to follow all of those precepts. So thanks for that, Ken.
Really
Thanks.
glad.
Right back to you, Philip. Your points are just excellent. The last session that we had, when you talked about some of the other key factors, you talked about how resistance and all the other factors that can develop when you don't have these kinds of factors going on, and communicating and leading and meeting with people. Always excellent points. And when Ed said, hey, he's got a discussion with Philip, are you interested? Absolutely. Just definitely. Thank you.
Thank you.
My job is to be a link maker.
So
Thanks for playing.
You're the deal maker, Ed. You are the ultimate deal maker.
Link maker, make me a match.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Ed. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to get
this
this rendered and ready for public viewing during the day today. Send it out. Thank you very much.
Thanks to both of you. Thanks very much.
You too. Have a good weekend. Bye.
Come back again together.
Yep, definitely.
Sounds great.
Thank
Be
you.
well, guys.
Bye. You too.